as a great public health measure.
Well, Mr. Chairman.
I call the Honourable Mary-Ann Street.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Part 2 of this bill is what is currently under debate at the moment in this House. And I need to raise some questions about Part 2 because my colleagues have raised some significant points in previous contributions. But I'm not sure that everybody watching this debate understands what the significance of Part 2 is. Part 2 of this bill excludes the price increases on tobacco, these ones that happen, the 10% increase, 1st of January every year for the next 4 years, excludes that price increase from the basket of goods that are considered when calculating the Consumer Price Index. And so, when calculating how much the cost of everything has gone up this year, and therefore what the Consumer Price Index should be in order to bring up people who are on benefits, whose benefits are CPI indexed, people go out and they work out what people spend their money on. What do people spend most of their money on? Well, they might spend most of their money on food. They might spend some money on petrol. They might spend some money on childcare. They might spend some money on clothing. They might spend some money on alcohol. They might spend some money on tobacco. And so the basket of goods, whether it's fruit and vegetables, chicken or meat, or all those other things that are put together in order to calculate what the Consumer Price Index should be, in this legislation will leave out the expenditure on tobacco. And who for? For people who are receiving payments under Children, Young Persons and Their Families Act, so payments to people or organisations who are providing care for children. So that's the caregivers. It'll take out anybody who's on a student allowance. It'll take out anybody who's getting working for families entitlements. It will take out anybody getting New Zealand superannuation. It will take out anybody who is receiving any of the main social security benefits. It will take out anybody on long-term residential care, and it will take out people whose income comes from veterans' pensions. So, Mr. Chairman, the point of this, if I understand it correctly, and I just look in the direction of the officials for a moment, but if I understand this correctly, the CPI basket of goods that is assessed, what do most people spend their money on, how much has that gone up compared with last year, will exclude for people on benefits, those benefits I've outlined and those other payments and entitlements I've just described, it will exclude tobacco. So in other words, if you spend a lot of money on tobacco, or if people generally spend a proportion of their income on tobacco, then that will not be taken into account for the purposes of calculating the CPI and thereby raising people's benefits. Now, this is a device. It is something which could be excused, which could be even justified. But my question to the government is, where is the consistency? Where is the consistency? If tobacco is bad for people, and this is a health measure, then why not exclude it from the CPI indexation across everything? Across everything. Not just the benefits that people are going to have to live on in order to survive. The CPI is important for wage negotiations. Unions go in to wage negotiations on behalf of their members wanting to compensate for the consumer price index and the increase in prices that have happened in the previous year. Because, Mr Chairman...
The Honourable Marianne Street.
Because unions don't want their members' incomes, wages and salary to fall behind prices. And therefore the consumer price index is important. It's important to wage and salary earners as well. So why is this tobacco provision being applied to beneficiaries only? If it is a good thing to do, surely, I ask the Minister and the Chair, if this is a good thing to do, isn't it a good thing to do for everybody? If this is a health measure, wouldn't it benefit everybody's health? I can understand the import of excluding it from the CPI calculation. But what I can't understand is simply targeting benefits in that respect. And that, to me, doesn't make sense. If any member opposite says that I'm wrong about this, that I've got the wrong end of the stick, would they please get up and take a call? Because it needs explaining. If the Minister who moved this bill, Tariana Turia, could get up and say, make some explanation as to why only beneficiaries are going to have this item excluded from the CPI calculation, the basket of things that goes into a CPI calculation. In other words, their benefit will go up by the CPI, but not by as much as it would if it were taking tobacco into account. Right? So I can see that the government saves money in the process, but why is this only being applied to beneficiaries? This is a kind of discrimination that I thought we weren't tolerating in this country. But now perhaps that we have got the gap between the rich and the poor in New Zealand has become so pronounced, and the people on benefits are so much at the bottom of the heap these days, that the government has decided that it doesn't really matter how they are treated any longer, because all we hear is social obligation. All we hear is what people ought to be doing for themselves when their lives hit some rough patches. The government's expectation is that they will pull themselves up by their own bootstraps and correct their own circumstances, which is not always possible. However, the government is blind to that kind of consideration and simply makes this exclusion of the price increases from the required CPI indexation related to social assistance. In fact, those are the words on the page, related to social assistance. If a member opposite can contradict that for me, please get up and tell me. Tell me I've got it wrong. But that's what I read on the page. I see all the members opposite studiously looking down and doing busy work so that they don't have to look as if they are responding or listening. I would like somebody, a minister, any minister, Mrs. Collins, any minister, I would really like any minister, not just the minister and the chair, although I'd welcome her participation, but the minister interjecting, I would welcome her clarification around this as well, because it seems to me that it is discriminatory, it's not fair, it's bashing the people at the bottom of the heap again, and somehow this government is going to turn it into a health measure. A health measure. Well, when you're at the bottom of the heap and you're struggling to survive on care payments or benefits, then quite frankly, the health inequalities that descend upon you are insurmountable, and they become almost the last thing you're able to contend with as you're busy trying to make ends meet. So, Mr. Chairman, I would welcome the intervention of any National Party member here to correct me in this respect. If I'm not wrong, then this is discriminatory. This isn't reasonable, and it is simply another example of this bill being a tax grab and not a health measure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I recognise the Honourable Parakura Oromia.